Welcome, everyone, to today's episode of Carefulist, the podcast. I'm Katie Christophic, founder of The Carefulist. Today, we welcome Kathleen Korpela, who is the founder of Living Goldenwell. Welcome to the show, Kathleen.
Hi, Katie. So great to be here. Thank you so much for having me. I am so excited to connect with you and have this conversation today.
I am really grateful that you could join us. For those of you listening at home, Kathleen and I are on opposite coasts of the US. So it is lunchtime for me and early morning for her.
That's right. I have my coffee with me.
So, um, why don't you share a bit about yourself and your caregiving story with the audience?
Yeah. So let's see, a bit about myself and my caregiving story. So I was a sandwich generation family caregiver for my father. And sandwich generation is when you're simultaneously caring for aging parents and you're raising kids at the same time. Sometimes people aren't, familiar with that term. And I supported my father, who was diagnosed with Alzheimer's dementia. Um, and he has now passed away. He passed away a little over about a year and a half ago. And so
Sorry.
he went through, thank you. He went through his journey was from, I like to say from diagnosis to death was about 8 years.
Okay.
Yeah. And it was interesting, Katie. I am sort of one of those stories and elder caregiving journeys of an adult child who was unexpectedly thrust into this role and into the
Yep.
experience with my dad upon his diagnosis
Hmm.
because he was very healthy, really, outside of the dementia.
Yep.
And we as a family didn't really know the signs to look for.
Hmm.
We didn't really know a lot of the signs and the signals. And so when we finally received his diagnosis, it really came as a shock to me and to my family. And that
Yeah.
was really what kind of unexpectedly catapulted us into supporting him and into this whole caregiving experience and this caregiving journey.
Hmm. Yeah. I relate to that on every level. Sandwich
Mhm.
caregiver, dementia, that whole experience really, particularly the part where there was nothing else wrong. So
Right.
it's just the dementia. And I mean, that in and of itself is quite a beast. But when you're experiencing that, we in my family refer to it as you hit every branch of the ugly tree on the way down.
I've never heard that. To the ugly tree on the way down. Yeah, yeah. It's a journey for sure. And I'll say, Katie, I was woefully unprepared
Mm,
for stepping into what I call the elder care phase, really.
yeah.
Stepping into this phase and this chapter in this season of life that adult children find themselves in, which is supporting an aging parent. It's like
Mhm.
whether there's cognitive impairment like a dementia or a cancer or just general old age.
Yeah.
I was woefully unprepared for it. And I remember sort of thinking, well, wait a second. Why didn't anybody tell me about this? Why didn't anybody
Yeah.
tell me this was coming?
Right.
And so I had really, it was a mix of complex emotions too,
Hmm.
where I felt kind of anger and frustration in a way.
Hmm.
Um, why my dad? Why does this have to happen to my family? And at the same time, like, why am I so unprepared for this? Why do I not know how to kind of navigate this phase? Why didn't anybody tell me this was coming? And
Yeah.
I was thinking about it at the time that my dad, he was 72 when he was diagnosed. I had two young kids. My daughter was 4.5, and my son was 6 months old. And so I was sort of thrust into the sandwich generation
Hmm.
at a much earlier age. And I didn't have people in my networks and my friends who were going through it with supporting an aging parent.
Yep.
And I remember thinking, 4.5 years, let's say, into parenting, and had time to plan for becoming a mother, preparing to become a mother, having children, and really stepping into that. And oftentimes, elder care, supporting an aging parent in, however they start to show that age or that decline or whatever it is they start to have can
Hmm.
really become, you can be thrust into it as well in a really unexpected way and feeling woefully unprepared for it.
Yeah. Oh boy, do I relate to that. My daughter was 3 and my son was a newborn when
Oh,
my
that's
parents
so
came to
close to
stay
my
with
ages
us.
then. Yeah.
Yeah, and I had had a C-section, and so they came to stay with us to help me recover when my husband had to go back to work. And I had my
Mhm.
suspicions about my mom prior to that. But that week that they came to stay, it was like, oh, not only are we definitely dealing with dementia, she is much further along than I thought. And
Mm,
so it's like, okay, I have toddler and I have a newborn and same deal. I'm learning to be a mom and now I have to figure out how do I navigate this elder care or aging parents thing. I think my perception of it was, you know, you're in your 50s or maybe a little older and your kids are in college. And so they're kind of grown before you're dealing with this. You don't think about, being in your early 30s. I mean, I was in my early 30s at the time. My mom was in her early 60s. Um, I thought we had more time. And I think that is the common theme. Everybody thinks they have more time.
they have more time. Yeah, I can
Yeah.
completely relate to that. I was in my mid 30s. I
Mm.
thought, I thought I had more time. And what's interesting is these types of things, when you step into them, force you to face the reality of your parents' aging, decline, and mortality.
Yes.
And it's very, very hard. We think our parents are going to live forever,
Right. Yeah.
and we think they're always going to be around, and they're always going to be healthy and how we, maybe know them, right?
Hmm.
And then these things happen either gradually or suddenly or whatever
Hmm.
that really forces you to face the reality, right, of their
Yes.
mortality. And it's very, very hard in and of itself, on top of
Mm.
everything else you're going through, trying to, manage a career and work and young kids and a marriage and all of these other responsibilities, on top
Mm.
of now adding this element of an aging parent, to the mix. It's
Right.
it's a lot.
It is a lot. And so you mentioned career. So if we can take a step back and talk about what you were doing, what your professional life looked like prior to caregiving and what you've learned since.
Yeah, so I had a long corporate career in business and technology. I had a very demanding corporate career. I worked at very large companies in a number of different roles in financial services, corporate finance, business process automation, and business development. And so I had just a very demanding corporate career. And I will say, Katie, and we should do another future episode just on the topic of balancing career and
Ugh,
elder caregiving responsibilities.
that could be a series in and of itself.
That could be a series in and of itself, and we could do a part two on that topic. But in taking it to kind of my career, it was hard. I had to
Yeah.
learn how to advocate for myself in the workplace. I think today, businesses and companies are really unprepared for supporting employees with
Yes.
elder caregiving responsibilities, supporting those folks who, need to take their mom or their dad to a doctor's appointment or need to make some phone calls on behalf of their, parent, whatever that kind of
Mhm.
support or help might look like for them. And it's a huge, huge gap. And those people like myself don't see their workplaces supporting them adequately, whether that's at the corporate level or an organizational level, or even just with their managers on their teams,
Hmm.
because companies are not structured, they're not set up, they don't have the programming and the supports and the resources to help employees who are dealing with aging parents. They've made a
Right.
long road in supporting parents, new parents, maternity leave, paternity leave, and those types of programs. But
Hmm.
I would say businesses have a long ways to go in supporting employees when it comes to elder care and aging parents. So it
Yeah.
was it was really hard from that perspective, and I had to learn how to be able to, like I said, advocate for myself and figure out different ways to manage that balance and those competing commitments. But it
Hmm.
was really, really hard. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I also had a corporate career, so I completely
Mm.
empathize and understand. Um, you have this scenario where, okay, I'm a mom, and now I'm a mom for a second time, or, a third time, or whatever, how many kids you have. And in some cultures, that's corporate cultures, that's a strike against you, right? Because
Mhm.
now you're mom first, and your job is second. And then at home, you're supposed to be mom first and the job is second. And it's like this impossible thing. Like you're supposed to work like you don't have kids and have kids like you don't have a job.
Yeah.
And there have been, inroads and progress made. And I think it's really interesting because on the opposite end of that spectrum, you have folks who are dealing with aging population, whether they are taking care
Mhm.
of their parents, whether they are taking care of grandparents in some situations, aunts, uncles. We have workforce that we're working until we're 67 or older. So then you're talking about caring for spouses.
Right.
And not everyone makes the choice to become a parent, but almost everyone
Yeah.
will either give care or require it.
Right.
And we
Right.
have not made the progress that we need to in that way.
Oh, Katie, I could not agree more. We have a long-term care system that's largely broken in our country, in addition to a
Mhm.
broken healthcare system.
Yeah.
We don't have infrastructure to support, our older population. And we have 10,000 people a day are turning 65,
Yep.
right? And so, we have an aging population. So there's a number of different socioeconomic and demographic factors at play as well in terms of the aging population. And
Hmm.
then you layer in, more and more people are getting married at a later age,
Hmm.
having kids if they choose to have kids at a later age, and they're finding themselves kind of in this middle stage
Yep.
of, the sandwich in the middle there in the sandwich generation. They've got the kids, they have their career going, and now
Mhm.
they're, supporting their aging parents. And I firmly believe that this is a socioeconomic and a shift that's going to just continue to grow and grow and grow and get larger and larger and larger. And, the need to support the aging population through the long-term care infrastructure and the healthcare infrastructure is going to grow, but
Mhm.
then also ways to support all of the family members, the adult children that have
Yeah.
to come alongside their parent and support them. The support infrastructure for the family caregiver is woefully missing.
Yeah. Yeah. The structure is a very loose term for what we
Mhm.
have kind of scotch taped together among people who have experienced
Band-Aid,
it.
Band-Aid
Yeah.
together. Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Hmm.
Oh, yes, it is exhausting and frustrating. And I think, the bulk of the sandwich generation caregivers you talk to, the thing that they sometimes say out loud, sometimes they don't, is I don't want to feel the guilt and like the slow burn rage that's happening
hmm
because nothing is set up the way it could be or the way it should be to make this work. And you're looking at the people that you love who have raised you,
Yeah.
people that you love who you are raising, and no one is getting the best of you.
Right, right. It's an incredibly hard place to be,
Yeah.
right? It's a very, very hard journey. It's a very hard experience, and but yet it happens, right? We go through experiences and journeys in our lives
Hmm.
with ones we love and we care about, and there's no one coming to save us. We
Right.
have to figure these situations and these experiences out in terms of how do we navigate them? How do we help create a support system around ourselves,
Hmm.
so that we can more thoughtfully, more mindfully navigate these really hard journeys and these hard phases and chapters, in our lives.
Yeah. So when you were going through the sandwich generation experience,
Mm.
um, was there something that someone did for you or said to you that you found really helpful and you took to heart? And if they didn't say anything, maybe they just did something. They dropped off a meal or they gave you a gift card somewhere, something.
I think what was most helpful
Mhm.
was in the moments where I did know others who were going through it.
Mhm.
And even just to have that type of connection or that conversation with someone who was going through it
Yeah.
and could relate to what I was going through,
Yes.
for
That's
sure.
key.
Yes. Or having connected with someone who had been through either a dementia journey, with a loved one, was just so helpful, I think, in
Mm.
coping. So that I think was probably, the most helpful thing for me was being able to be like, oh my gosh, you actually understand what I'm going through. You
Yes.
can intimately relate and empathize and sympathize and understand. You
Mhm.
understand what it's like, to have a parent with dementia, to deal with the administrative and the logistics of what it
Yep.
takes to come alongside supporting a parent, navigating the world of senior care systems and long-term care and, you name the thing, but you also know what it's like to be a mom and a parent, and so you can intimately understand the struggles that I'm going through and can relate to as well. So I
Yeah.
think just,
Oh, absolutely.
where I was able to meet and connect with others was incredibly helpful.
Yeah. I oh, do I so relate? And I
Mm.
lacked that a lot
Mhm, mhm.
because of, the age and the people that I worked with were very supportive, but they either didn't have someone with dementia that they were caring for or like their kids were grown. I did
Yeah,
not have somebody who was sandwich generation at the same time, other than my siblings. So we leaned on each other a lot.
yeah.
Um, but now, as I do this, I'm able to talk with people like you who, okay, we've made it to the other side. And that is also helpful to be able to talk about it, even though it's done. We're in this different phase of it.
We
Um,
are. I agree, Katie. And, you probably like me and so many others who have completed an elder caregiving journey
mhm.
care about giving back or
Yes.
paying it forward because we know how challenging it is, right? How
Mhm.
challenging it can be. And it left such an impact on our lives, not just the reality of losing a parent, right, and going through that in and of itself, but the
Mm.
whole kind of, elder caregiving journey and experience is so impactful. And you go through this phase with your parent and you come out the other side and you are a different person. You are a
Yes.
changed person. And in many ways, you want to support and help others and find different ways or outlets to serve others
Hmm.
who are going through it, who are going to be going through it.
Yeah.
Because you know just how challenging it can be, and making that just maybe a little bit easier for someone is a tremendous way to give back and really be in service of others too.
Yeah. Absolutely. You cannot go through something like caregiving and come out the other side of it who you were when you went in.
Right,
That is
right.
not how it works. Caregiving
Yeah,
is one of those great equalizer
yeah,
experiences.
yeah. Touching on what you were just mentioning about, people to relate to, I'll share a little bit of a story. I remember I was really isolated and
Mm.
lonely in my experience and what I was going through. And I was just so desperate for connection with others
Mhm.
and to be able to kind of relate to others that I drove an hour and a half to this in-person support group, an hour and a half north of me. And I think it
Mhm.
was kind of run by Alzheimer's Association at the time. And so I went to kind of like two sessions, and they were helpful to an extent. The common denominator was that we all had a loved one with Alzheimer's dementia.
Mhm.
But outside of that, I found it hard to genuinely and deeply relate to and connect to the other family caregivers that were in that group, because they weren't like me. They weren't
Yep.
in the sandwich generation. It was a lot of spouses caring for their husbands.
Mhm.
A lot of like older women caring for their husbands, which
Mhm.
very wonderful, but it wasn't a woman who was in her 30s or in her 40s, who was
Yep.
an ambitious professional, woman who had a demanding career and also had kids and, now supporting a parent. And so I
Right.
didn't have truly those sort of like-minded women that were going through other life experiences similar to mine, kind of
Mhm.
outside of that common denominator. And I think that would have been very, very helpful for me to have that type of connection on, with someone on sort of more a larger basis than just the, diagnosis that my parent had.
Yes. Yes. And it's not necessarily the age gap that's the
Mm.
difference. It is the life experience that is the difference
Yes.
because we are not the first group, but we are a more recent group
Mhm.
of more highly educated women who are looking at more challenging roles and leadership roles and climbing the corporate ladder. Not that some of those women in that age bracket didn't, but far fewer of them did. So
Yes.
we also don't have that same, wavelength to connect on.
Yes, yes. It's so true. We don't have that same wavelength. We don't have, we were kind of missing these role models
Yes.
in many ways as well, right? Like,
Hmm.
who are others that are like me, right, going through this, that I can again deeply relate to, like you said, the wavelength. Yeah.
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 It
Oh,
is. It's
yes.
when you think about the roles of women, right, through
Mhm.
generations.
Right.
And you make a good point about many more women now, right, and will be in the future,
Mm.
have these competing demands of professional careers that they care about, they're invested in, they want to maintain and grow those careers and those jobs,
Mhm.
and are struggling. How do they do that while taking on this new identity and new responsibility now of I'm also now, parenting my parent,
Yep.
supporting my parent in addition to everything else.
Yeah. And not to leave the guys out, it changes the dynamics for them too, because,
Yeah,
they want to support their spouse. They may be taking the lead in caregiving in their family. And when it comes to jobs and corporate life, in some ways, I think the stigma is there that it can be a little harder for them,
uh-huh.
because they're expected to be there and they're expected to have someone else who will step in and take care of it for them.
Right.
Um, so where the women have the expectation that we're the one who will step in and handle it, the guys have this other, different navigation where it's like, okay, well, if I want to help and I feel like I should help because it's the right thing to do, how do I navigate that in a world that has not been set up for that? And I think that's really the crux of where we're having these challenges, especially in corporate America and from just general work environments.
Yes. Yeah, I agree. And the yes, the male experience, the female experience is different, for some of the reasons that you mentioned. And we are unfortunately still operating with sort of, legacy and past conditioned gender norms and expectations.
Yes.
Right. And, still to this day, the majority of elder caregiving, supporting an aging parent, falls to the woman, the daughter, right?
Hmm.
But more and more men, especially if maybe they're an only child, they're the only son, or they live geographically closest to the parent,
Yep.
are finding themselves in supporting parents and in these caregiving roles as well, and are
Hmm.
also, struggling greatly with navigating a lot of these complex experiences on, okay, how do I even provide the emotional support that the social and emotional support that my
Yep.
parent might be seeking from me, right, as their child. And then how do I also navigate these expectations on me from my workplace and my career as well.
Yeah. So on that note, um, what you're doing now is
Mm,
not what you were doing before. So how did that come about? And then we'll talk about what you're doing.
yeah. Well, I mean, like I've kind of been talking about when going through, the elder care experience, as I call it,
Mhm.
really showed me firsthand, right, how little support and resources exist for
Yeah.
family caregivers and, for the adult children that are having to come alongside a parent. I think there is just a significant gap in the market in terms of comprehensive resources
Hmm.
across the emotional, support aspects that you might need and the practical aspects as
Yeah.
well. It's just lacking in terms of emotional support, basic just learning and education, right?
Hmm.
About kind of the world of elder care, the world of senior care services, dementia, even just, dementia 101, not just
Yeah.
dementia, but other long-term terminal illnesses, Parkinson's, whatever, your parent might be diagnosed with or experiencing.
Mhm.
And I think that that was really what inspired me and was the genesis for me to say, I feel a higher calling in my
Mhm.
life, having gone through this experience now with my dad. I feel a higher calling to do something different in my life,
Mhm.
something that gives me more meaning and more fulfillment. And I am very passionate about women and serving women.
Mhm.
And so, I felt this higher calling to really do something that was in service of women that are going through it or are going to be going through it with an aging parent. And so it was
Yeah.
really kind of a combination of feeling called, um, to step into a new chapter in my life, professionally, and be in more alignment with my desire to serve women
Hmm.
in a phase of their lives where there is so little resources and support out there,
Yeah.
really. And, Katie, I will say when I was, in the midst of going through it with my dad and kind of in the earlier stages and first couple of years of his diagnosis, it was very, very hard. And I was sort of very much in this why me, like why is this happening to me type of
Hmm.
a phase for a while as I was sort of going through, sort of this grief process, anticipatory grief process.
Yeah.
And as I started to get to a greater place of acceptance, um, around this and more kind of settled into, okay, this is our situation. My dad has dementia. I've got some kind of knowledge and some experience under me. As I got to more of a place of acceptance, I really started to shift my mindset into thinking,
Hmm.
one day, I just feel this. I think one day there's a silver lining in this experience and what I'm going through. And there's a reason I'm going through it at such a young age, at an earlier age, is because I really do believe that my experience has the potential to be in service of others.
Hmm.
How and in what way or what that looks like, I don't know quite yet, but I had that feeling deep inside of me.
Yeah. So fast forward to now,
Mm,
and you have more than a concept. You have your plan, and it's called Living Goldenwell. Why don't you
mm.
share with everybody what you came up with?
Yeah, so what I founded and created last year was my business. It's Living Goldenwell, and it is really a a business that is focused on supporting family caregivers.
Hmm.
And the overall arching mission of the company is to transform the elder care experience.
Mm.
Because what's so important is, we when we come out the other side, right, of an elder caregiving journey and supporting a parent, it so many of us deeply want to have no regrets, right,
Yeah.
about how things went or what we did, regardless of the circumstances that might have been outside of our control or beyond our control. And the reason that I focus on family caregivers and women and supporting them in transforming their elder care experience is so that they can have that sense of relief and that sense of, okay, you know what? I can do this. This is
Hmm.
hard, but I can do this. I feel supported. I have resources, information, knowledge. And when I come out the other side, I'm going to be able to say that was still challenging, but I feel good about the way that it went. I
Hmm.
feel like I don't have regrets about the time I was able to spend with my parent, and how I navigated that whole phase in my life. That's
Yeah.
incredibly important, to really help lift that weight of guilt or that potential weight of regret.
Yeah. And those are the two key drivers, right? I mean, and behind both of them is fear. You
Mm,
don't
mhm.
want to let your loved one down. You don't want to let yourself down. You want to make sure that they are cared for well
Yeah,
and that they know beyond the shadow of a doubt what you have chosen for them, what you are talking with them about is all in their best interest, and it's all coming from a place of love. And, I mean, you're not going to get out of it guilt free. That's just not possible. But we can certainly reduce the amount of guilt
yeah, that's right.
because a lot of it comes from having to guess and you're trying to figure things out quickly because there's no playbook for this. Well, we're trying to make a playbook.
That's right. That's right. We're trying to make a playbook. And, I will say, and I'll talk about the community that I have for women in just a moment. But kind of to some of the points that you were saying is, we want to be able to at least lift some of that guilt and lift some of that weight from our experience. I think that is just so important.
Yeah.
Um, but what I lead at Living Goldenwell is a community for women that are supporting aging parents and navigating elder care. It is an amazing virtual community. It is a network as well, and
Mhm.
it provides a number of different support and resources for women that are going through it with an aging parent. Um, it's open to all women globally. We have a number of different supports and resources that are available to women. So it's really a place and a space where women can come to meet and connect and network with and receive support and peer learning from other women that are going through an elder caregiving journey and supporting an aging parent. Because again, that connection with others and other like-minded women is so important as I think an effective coping mechanism.
Yes.
When you're going through it. But then also, like you were mentioning, they're just, we're lacking in a lot of kind of foundational knowledge, practical knowledge and information, guidebooks, playbooks. How do you handle this situation? What about this? How do I have this conversation? How do I think about helping my parents make, some informed decisions regarding their care and plan, versus, for maybe aging in place at home or, considering at what point maybe a transition to a senior care community would make sense. And
Mhm.
so amongst the resources and information available in the community is helping women to make informed decisions or giving them information such that they can help their parents and their family make
Mhm.
informed decisions about what's the best maybe plan of action for mom
Yeah.
or for dad so that women feel equipped to be advocates, not, advocates for their parents, but also help them make decisions as well. And if you yourself don't know, what the different types of, let's say, living and, senior care communities and living options outside of the home are, how can you help your parents make informed decisions about what might be right or best for them,
Right.
too? And so, yeah, it's a number of different programming and resources and supports we have. And the other thing that's an amazing aspect of the community is a contributing experts network. And so
Mhm.
I have am inviting in and growing a network of women who are experts and have subject matter expertise in any number of areas from aging and geriatric, senior care services, all the way to um, women's care, mental health, and well-being, and inviting them into the community to be contributing experts so that they can support the members in the community answering questions, providing educational workshops, or developing other resources and materials to provide expert guidance and advice to women that is specific to situations or areas and domains. So, for example, we have a woman who is a organizing, decluttering, and downsizing expert who works with families and older
That's a
adults when it
big
comes
ticket
to,
item.
yeah, when it comes to maybe getting ready for a move,
Yeah.
downsizing, transitioning maybe to for a move to a senior care community.
Mhm.
And another contributing expert we have is a women's coach in the community who
Mhm.
works on mindset coaching for women as well. So she is available. We also have a geriatric physical therapist who is a falls prevention specialist and so
Excellent.
is able to offer, very tailored advice and expert guidance around, what do I do with mom and dad regarding falls or mobility. And so it's an amazing, the Contributing Experts Network is an amazing resource that's available to women, depending on what their situation might be, what their questions might be, what type of information or help or support they might be looking for across a number of different, situations or challenges.
Yeah. Oh, that's incredible. Yeah,
Yeah.
oh my gosh, the sort of the decluttering one, my mom would be upset. Their house was not cluttered, but when like I think it's more common in some age brackets and in some areas of the country than others. Like my parents lived in the same house for more than 50 years. They were not the
Oh,
people who moved around. So, I mean, they got rid of things over time, but they had a ton of furniture.
yeah.
My mom did not throw pictures away. So, like hundreds of prints of pictures and lamps and all kinds of things that it's like, these are all really nice things, but we don't all have room for this stuff in our houses. So what are we going to do with this? And
Yeah.
just making a plan for that one thing. You're like, oh, well, we'll clean out the house. No, it is
Yeah.
not
And
that simple.
it's just not that simple. And, the situational challenges that, we find ourselves in when we start dealing with mom and dad and dealing with aspects of their aging and their decline, I mean, literally run A to Z.
Mhm.
And it's so, so valuable and empowering to have somebody that's kind of in your corner or someone that you can go to, right? That support system around you to say, okay, the situation I've got to sort of tackle right here and right now is, how do we deal with mom and dad's house and,
Mhm.
getting them ready for downsizing or getting them ready again for maybe a transition and a move across the country because they're moving in with another relative or right, and that's a
Yeah,
very big challenge. How do I approach that conversation? How do I address the emotional aspect that comes with big changes in transitions beyond just this dealing with the stuff, as
yeah,
well? And so
yeah.
much of
And
the oh yeah, go ahead.
I was just thinking specifically about sandwich generation
Mm,
and the younger side of sandwich generation. The additional challenge you have is your parent still thinks of you. I mean, you are their child, but they also still think of you kind of as a kid because if you're in your late 20s or early 30s, like you're not in your 50s, you're not in your 60s. There is a difference there
yeah.
with the role, and they still very much want to be parenting you. And in a lot of ways, especially if you've just had your first child, you still need to be parented by them. So that whole role reversal adds a layer of emotionality to it that can really make guiding them with decisions tougher because
Very, very
they
much so.
can want to resist that, and you can see why.
Yes, and what you are touching on, Katie, is such an important element that people don't think about and are woefully unprepared for, which is navigating this role reversal and this
Yep.
role identity where you're now taking on this dual identity of, I am obviously the child, right, to my parent, but now I'm also taking on this new role and this new identity of I am now parenting my parent in certain ways. And so
Mhm.
how do I think about and navigate this dual role identity moving forward? And in what situations, what moments, what contexts, what interactions, what
Mhm.
conversations, am I the child, or am I the parent? And
Yeah.
how do I navigate that? And having guidance and advice around that is so helpful, in addition to hearing how others are handling that and navigating that themselves, so that you can say, oh, okay, that's actually a really good tip, or that's
Hmm.
a really good way to think about it. Let me kind of take that away and let me see how that kind of works for me and try that on. It's
Yeah.
just it's priceless to have that type of guidance and that type of
Yes.
support, right? That's what it means. And that's a perfect example of what it can look like to transform your elder care experience, right?
Hmm.
To be able to transition from someone who is doesn't know what they're doing or feels unsure about themselves, maybe in interactions or situations, to much more confident and saying, okay, let me try this and see how this kind of works. Okay, you know what? I'm feeling good about this. Like it's okay. Okay, you know what? I can do this. I'm going to do this. It's
Yeah,
just so powerful.
it absolutely is. And so your community, um, it sounds to me like it's asynchronous. So somebody can go and post and ask a question and people will respond. Is it also like scheduled times where people can come together?
Yes, yeah, it's
Okay,
both. Yeah, we have
that's
an
it.
online community forum that is always available for women to ask questions and connect and network and get tips or advice, ask questions. But then we also have regular biweekly live group calls as well.
Nice.
And so they usually take the form of either coaching conversations or guided discussion topic conversations, or where women can just come together and network and connect and meet each other and learn from each other kind of in a peer support environment as well. And then of the other programming that we have, we also do live educational workshops as well. And then we always record everything because
Mm.
there is no busier a woman than, someone in the sandwich generation, right? Who's got so many
True.
competing demands on their time. And so we always record all of our events and all of our group calls and our programming. So everything is available later on demand for viewing as part of our workshop library and our learning library that we have as well. Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for joining us and sharing all of this information. Where
Yeah.
can people find more information about Living Goldenwell?
Yeah. So the name of the community is called Caregiving from the Middle. And the best place to go is my website. It's www.livinggoldenwell, all one word.com. And on my website, they can learn about the Caregiving from the Middle community and the membership there and what that looks like in terms of the experience and the programming. They can also learn more about the Contributing Experts Network that's available to members inside the community. They can contact me. And I also have some free resources available on my website as well. I offer a really helpful aging parent care assessment. If
Mm.
you are new to aging parents and you're not quite sure, sort of where things stand with your parent, with you, the aging parent care assessment is a very helpful resource. And then
Mhm.
I also offer a very helpful masterclass video webinar on women navigating elder care and the 4 shifts that women can make to help transition from feeling overwhelmed to more empowered in this area of their life. So it's a free masterclass that I make available. It's all on my website there that people can check it out at livinggoldenwell.com.
Fantastic. And if you happen to be listening to this, we will put the link in the show notes as well to make sure people can find it. Thank you
Right.
so much for joining us today, Kathleen. And thank you for joining us wherever you are in the car, at home, walking your dog, doing whatever. If you need more information, you can find it at carefulist.com. And until next time, take care.
Thanks, Katie.